Hi and welcome back to Manila. I'm doing a bit of a evening stroll here in Makati, and while I'm walking here through the streets of Makati, I thought I'm going to put together a video with some helpful tips that help you with your planning for your next trip here to Manila and the Philippines. So let's get started. So the first question that you may ask yourself is, what is a good time to go to Manila? And there's basically three seasons that divide up the year. The first season is the winter season, which is usually September, October, November and December. That's the season where you're going to find the mildest climate and the sunniest weather. That's naturally also the high season here in the Philippines, and where you most likely have the sunniest days. The months of September to December are also the holiday season. Basically, the Christmas season starts already in September and comes to full fruition then in the month of December. The second season is the dry season, which is from January to April, and that's the time when you experience lots of sunny days and lots of travelers and tourists come to the Philippines to enjoy the good weather. The third season is the wet season, which basically starts around June, July, with May and June being shoulder months, and the rain season really is in full fruition in July and August. And especially August, you're going to find quite a few days with lots of rainfall. Having said that, most of my travel here was in the month of August, and I must say I was really lucky with the weather. Yes, there were some rainy days, but overall I had lots of sunshine, and it was a great time to be here in the Philippines because there were less tourists and travelers around, and the prices were generally a little bit lower, and the attractions and landmarks less busy. But here you have it. So now up to you to think through when you want to come here. Now that you've decided when to go, it's time to think about what should you pack. And there's different considerations that you want to make. So generally speaking, the Philippines is always a tropical climate, but the temperatures can vary. And a big factor for me is also the air conditioning, because there's quite a difference between the outside temperatures and what's happening inside, or even in a taxi or bus. Many of the buildings and buses are cooled down to freezing temperatures, and I was always lucky to have a sweater or a light jacket that can protect me from the freezing temperatures inside. So I guess you want to pack layers of clothing, some light clothing for outdoors, but also a jacket or a sweater that can help when it gets cold. Another thing that I always bring is sunscreen. That will protect you against the sun. Sunscreen is available here in the Philippines, but it tends to be a little bit more expensive than in the US or Europe. So I would bring that. I would bring an umbrella, although you can buy one here as well for cheap. But that's certainly something that you want to have, because no matter what time of the year you want to come here, there might be an occasional rain shower happening. I always bring a hat to protect against the sun, and you may want to bring a poncho or a light rain jacket to protect against the rain. Another thing that you want to bring is good shoes, because you're going to do quite a bit of walking here, even though the public transport system is excellent. And of course you can use Grabs and taxis, and I'm going to cover that later in this video. But definitely bring good shoes, it's going to help a lot. Then depending on what your itinerary looks like, you probably want to bring some beach gear and maybe some hiking gear. And my other tip would be to not pack too much, because you're probably also going to hit the malls here, and there are plenty of them in the Philippines. And if you do that, you're most likely going to buy something. So it's always good to have a little bit of space left in your luggage. Most likely the prices for the clothing and the goods that you buy here, it's going to be cheaper than back home. So you don't have to bring everything that you need here. If you come from the US, you likely won't need a travel adapter, because the outlets that I found here in the hotels and apartments were all US outlets. But many of the hotels also have outlets that allow for the European style 2-prong plugs to be plugged in. So that's all very convenient. Having said that, it's always useful to keep a universal travel adapter with you no matter where you travel. In terms of entry requirements, those change continuously here in the Philippines, especially with the COVID restrictions being gradually lifted, but still some of them in place. Things can change every week. So I recommend to just check the internet on the latest regulations and make sure you're compliant, because otherwise you're going to have trouble getting into the country. When you come to the Philippines, you're likely going to arrive in Manila at the Ninoy Aquino International Airport. This is a huge airport with 4 terminals, and not all of them are close together. But luckily in all of the terminals there's public transportation available. So when you arrive at the airport, there are several options that you have in terms of getting into town. The first and most convenient option is to just take a Grab. Grab is the Asian version of Uber. Uber doesn't operate in the Philippines anymore, but I highly recommend you download the Grab app before you arrive in the Philippines. Set up an account, which is for free. The app pretty much works like Uber. If you're familiar with Uber or Lyft, you're going to not have a problem using Grab. I found it super convenient. It is not the cheapest way to get around, but it is certainly the most convenient, and in many cases the fastest way to get from A to B in Manila. Another option is of course to rent a car, but bear in mind that the traffic in Manila can be crazy, and you may not want to be the one who's going to be stuck in traffic in the Manila rush hour. In terms of public transportation, you have several options. The most convenient option is to take the MRT or the LRT. Those are the railway systems that exist in Manila. Within Manila, those are great options to get around. Whenever I took the MRT or the LRT, I never paid more than 20 pesos, which is about 35 cents. Another great way to get around in Manila are of course the jeepneys. The jeepneys are an absolute classic, and you have to at least try a ride in a jeepney once while you're here in the Philippines. There's over 75,000 jeepneys covering the Manila metropolitan area, and they cover all the major road networks throughout the city. They're by far the cheapest way to get around, and I think also the most fun way to get around. An added bonus is that you get to interact with the locals, who are all taking the jeepneys as well on their way to or from work. A typical jeepney ride is going to cost you about 11 pesos, maybe 15 cents or so. There are also certain regular bus routes that lead through Manila, but for those you need to know the stations of where they stop, and that can be a little bit confusing, and even up to date I haven't completely figured it out. The last option that is one of my favorites here in Manila are the tricycles. Those are basically motorbikes with a sidecar that fits 1 or 2 people, and they're fairly inexpensive, and they're great for local neighborhood transport. They're just great and really fun to ride. Now let's talk about accommodation, because that's of course something that's important when you come into a new city. And there's obviously many different options that are available to you here in Manila, ranging from super high-end accommodations and 5-star establishments like the one behind me, the Peninsula, or in front of me, the Shangri-La. Or if you want to really splurge, there's the Okada, which is a super high-end hotel very close to the airport. But there's also all kinds of other accommodations for any price range, starting with very affordable hostels that you can find even here in Makati. What is, however, important is that you think about where you're going to stay, because with Manila traffic, that can matter. So if your plan is to visit more of the historic areas around Intramuros, then you may want to stay in Ermita and in the area around there. If you're more into malls and shopping and the glam of the BGC and Makati, those might be the places where you want to stay. And that's how you avoid being stuck in traffic every day. Alright, so let's talk about currency and money. The Philippines use the Filipino peso, and 100 pesos is about $1.80 at the time of this video. That means that $1 is about 56 pesos. Now, a lot of establishments here in the Philippines accept credit cards, but I also have to say that in many instances they don't. So it's always very advisable to bring enough cash with you to pay for local restaurants, or certainly for street food, or any types of outfits that are not necessarily international or domestic chains that can afford the credit card rates. A good way to get cash is to use the many ATM machines that are across the country. Certainly here in Manila you'll find them everywhere, and I found that a very convenient way to get cash, and you get better rates than in some of the foreign exchange bureaus that you find at the airport and across the city as well. So let's talk about language. The fact that most Filipinos speak English makes it so easy to interact with them. Of course, it's always nice to speak a little bit of Tagalog. I personally didn't learn that much, but I didn't have to because everybody speaks English. Super convenient, and I had a blast interacting with locals here, and they're super, super nice. And I think that's one of the big advantages of the Philippines compared to other countries in Asia. Everybody speaks English. It's just great. So let's talk about safety. Obviously, I'm here on a night walk in the middle of Makati, which is a very, very safe area. But I've also done night walks, for example, in Tondo, which is considered to be the unsafest area in Manila. And I must say, no matter where I went, I never felt a single minute unsafe. Security here is pretty phenomenal. You'll find security guards and police pretty much everywhere as well, but I almost feel they're not needed. I never saw any pickpocketing or any criminal activity while I was here. And quite frankly, even the neighborhoods that might seem sketchy on paper, the people were so friendly and so nice. Personally, I feel much less safe in many parts of the US than here in the Philippines. So if that's of any help, I think safety is not a concern. But having said that, it's always good advice to keep your valuables at home and only travel with those things that you really need and keep them close to you, because who knows, there might be the occasional pickpocket anywhere, especially in crowded areas. So I think that's always a good thing to do, no matter where you go. Maybe a quick word on tipping when you go to restaurants or you use transport. The Philippines are a little bit influenced by the US when it comes to tipping, so tipping is something common. However, it's a little bit less standardized than in the US. Most restaurants add a gratuity charge to the bill, and you'll see that on your bill when you pay. Generally speaking, it's always good to round up to the next highest amount, and that will be appreciated by the people who provide a service. Okay, so there you have it. Those are my tips for planning a trip to Manila and navigating a little bit this beautiful city. I hope you find those tips useful, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. What other tips you have for travelers that come to Manila? And if you haven't done so yet, please also check out my other videos in the beautiful Philippines. I covered quite a bit throughout my journey here, and hopefully those videos will also give you a bit of a sense of what you can do and see here in this beautiful country. And if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell to get updates on my regular posts, and I see you next video. Have a good one.